In this video, we're going to talk about managing in a crisis. It feels like all of 2020 and 21 now too have been a crisis. But what are we learning about managing in a crisis, and how do we work to minimize the impact of future crises? Answers to these questions and more is coming up right now. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams and the host of HR Shop Talk. On this show, you get expert insight into all things HR. I encourage you to subscribe to the show by clicking on the button at the bottom of the screen to continue learning from my smart guests. Today, my guest is Shondee Nye. Shondee is a director of HR with more than 20 years of experience in a wide array of industries like transportation, healthcare, public practice, and retail. Hi, Shondee, how are you?
I'm great, thanks.
Well, thanks for coming on. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. So the pandemic has certainly created a crisis in HR. Can you describe your experience?
Sure. So, like most organizations, we did have our disaster planning done. However, COVID wasn't at all what we had expected or had planned for. Our organization is strongly based on relationship selling, face-to-face interactions, and personal people relationships. So we really had to pivot overnight. We put a high priority for us on communication, both with our management teams and with our employees. So our HR team reacted very quickly, contacted any employee for whom we didn't have a personal email, and that allowed us to communicate directly and quickly with our team members outside of their work email. We also created a COVID branded communication template so that our teams then became aware and familiar and could differentiate that communication from others in their inboxes. And we really trained them to expect to receive notifications from us. We also decided to post communications on our HRIS portal so that it was accessible outside of our network, and then we weren't reliant on people being inside the store, inside our network to be able to get those communications. So none of that we had to do before, and none of that did we conceive of when we thought about our disaster planning. So really, for us, we started with communication as sort of the beginning point of our planning.
We hope that the pandemic is going to be done soon, and it's going to be a memory at some point, but there will be more crises in the future. So can you talk a little bit about what HR's role in a crisis is? I know it will depend somewhat on the crisis, but what generalizations can we make?
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think it is crisis, or I do think it is crisis dependent. I think the principles, though, are the same across different situations. Our role really is to lead crisis communications to our internal team members and focus really on that employee relations piece. It's not really a one-way street either. We have to be listening actively to what we're hearing kind of beyond that war room door. So, for us, we decided to funnel all communications through the HR inbox, and I met daily with my team in the morning to get a feel for what questions, concerns, comments were coming from our team members. And then that allowed us really to focus our communications for the day on what mattered most to our team members, both those who were laid off and the ones who were still here. So, confidence, we had to be confident that we were instilling confidence in our teams that we knew what we were doing, even if most of the time we probably didn't. This is very different from anything we planned for. When you think SARS or H1N1 or any of that, this just happened so quickly and differently that we didn't always know. But we have to be reactive. We have to think about our displaced members as well as those that are left here holding down the fort. Depending on the crisis, it will alter a bit. But for the most part, I think our role in time of crisis is being the leader for employee relations and internal communications. And as long as you're focused on those two pieces, you're going to do just fine.
Okay. That makes it sound easy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's our job too, right? Just
Yeah.
appear calm, make it look like it's nice and easy, and then people believe and follow, right?
Right, right. When a crisis arrives, in this case, it was a pandemic, but a few years ago, Calgary had a flood. It just can be anything. How does HR prioritize what they're going to do first and take action?
Yeah. So, in this situation, everything developed so quickly. It was kind of astounding. We'd be in a meeting, developing communications, trying to prioritize what we're going to do. And that's based on the data you had, sort of in that meeting at the time. And we'd come out and discover that while we were meeting, things had changed. So for us, it was really about slowing down and not being in such a rush to come up with our priorities or to send out information. And that was really hard. So, in this situation, we started waiting for the government updates, which were coming in the late afternoon in Alberta. So when you think about that, for us, typically you come in the office, you grab your coffee, you get sorted for the day, and you sort of develop what you're going to work on for the day. We had to retrain ourselves to kind of wait for the briefing, start to develop late afternoon, finish up in the morning, send it out, and then react thereafter. So,
Mhm.
for us, the primary focus we had was to focus on our employees, who's on site, what do they need to know today to do their work, who's laid off, what do they need to know today to work through what they need personally, whether that's a document with links to every financial COVID resource, the Service Canada link, step-by-step information on how to apply for EI. We just really prioritized by focusing on what our employees were experiencing at that time. And
Mhm.
a lot of it is uncertainty, frustration, fear, and from there you just have to tease out what the topics are and prioritize
Mhm.
our work from there. We also prioritized our EAP, or our employee assistance program, and that the supports that they could provide, just because it was such an emotional thing for people, and there was so much uncertainty.
If you found this interesting or insightful, subscribe to see all the episodes and comment. What advice can you share about managing in a crisis? Let us know in the comment section below. And back to you, Shondee. So I imagine that employees, despite all your best efforts, were still critical. They're scared. But how did you deal with that kind of criticism and input?
I think the biggest criticism we got was not communicating fast enough.
Mm.
And, for us, employees are literally emailing us at the same time as announcements are being made, looking for clarification. So for us, we got really good at creating an expectation that we would have company specific information following those communication briefings. And then over time, employees became confident that we would provide those updates when we
Mhm.
knew them. And I was also clear with our leadership team that it was okay to say we don't know.
Mhm.
A lot of our communications often sort of focused around the theme of this is our best understanding right now. So, the criticism about communicating quickly, I think, we just got good at communicating something rather than nothing so that
Mhm.
the void was not filled up by wrong information or unreliable sources.
So no one was going to avoid COVID, but what could HR be doing to prepare for a crisis so that we minimize the impact when it does arrive?
I think just being ahead of the planning, based on what you do know at the time. So, having whether it's a pandemic plan or your infectious plan, or your disaster recovery plans, whatever those are, and
Mhm.
then just staying on top of the information. So, for us in this situation, we've been really good at staying about a week or two ahead of the governmental announcements.
Mhm.
I suddenly became really good at predicting what next steps would be just based on what I'm seeing from case statistics, media, sort of what you're hearing around general consensus of the public. And then that allows us to plan for it rather than react to it and not be behind the ball trying to meet the latest restrictions or requirements.
Mhm.
And I think that also allows your employees to feel safer because we're, as an organization, not reacting to information and safety protocols. However, we're ahead of them. So when employees understand that we're treating their safety with the utmost of importance, then hopefully we don't face that crisis internally, for which we're not prepared because we haven't had that planning in place. And employees become confident in that. And, being connected to the information and planning for it as best you can will give your employees that confidence. And I think that helps you stay ahead of the crises in the moment.
Mm-hmm. So you said you had a disaster recovery plan prior to COVID. So has it been helpful?
No.
Oh, darn. I was hoping
No.
you'd say it would. That would
You
mean
know,
you could appreciate your honesty though. That would mean that you could at least have something in place that would help.
yeah, I shouldn't say no. I think, as I said at the beginning, we are a relationship-based organization as it relates to how we do business.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we anticipated things like, an H1N1 that possibly, impacted parts, not all. I don't think we anticipated full, complete shutdown of entire,
Mm-hmm.
systemic organizations and supports. I'd like to know the person who had that pandemic plan in place because, yeah, that's pretty some pretty good foresight there. So I think, yes, there were some cornerstones there that we turned to, but a lot of stuff really was, webinars with like-minded people sharing
Mm-hmm.
ideas in real time.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean that right there is a useful idea, right? So, final question here. You have said a few times that your business is kind of an in-person type business. Nevertheless, some of it I am assuming can be done from home. So, do you think that remote work is here to stay in some form?
Absolutely. But, I think what we're finding as businesses that, every person enjoys a different work situation and every business demands a different one. And, it's really not a one size fits all. Some people, some businesses like to work from home, it works for them.
Mm-hmm.
Others prefer not to do it at all. And then there's some like me that sort of prefer a bit of a blend of it where
Mm-hmm.
you're connecting in person and doing those types of things. And then also having that time to be at home and work a little more flexibly. So, I think we're going to find that businesses will find a blend of that. And they've learned really to focus on who really needs to be on site, bum and seat to do their
Mm-hmm.
job, and who can telecommunicate effectively.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think we're going to see a wholesale return to full on-site work arrangements for many people.
Yeah.
And I think the cat lawyer meme from a couple weeks ago. When the courts can turn their minds to remote hearing and lawyers appearing remotely without
Yeah.
cat filters, I guess. But
Yeah.
witness swearing, virtual document repositories for cross-examination,
Yeah.
like those trends are not going to be ignored, right? So,
Mhm.
I think it really creates kind of an exciting challenge for HR people is how do we engage that remote workforce without the traditional constructs that we've had in the past?
All right. Thanks, Shondee. HR needs to be prepared for crises just as operational and other functional aspects of the organization do. I also did an interview with an expert on remote work who talked about a lot of the things we've talked about today. And a link to that episode is right here. Thanks for watching and see you next time.